Hello, welcome back to Emerge, the health podcast for busy, high-performing women. Today, I am joined by Lia Pinelli. Lia, welcome to the show,
Thank
fellow.
you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And let's just jump right into it. I know you are a life coach and work some in the weight loss world, though we were just talking about how we both don't really identify with that. So
Yes.
let's just start with some of your story and how you got into doing what you do, and then we're going to have a great conversation, I know. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, really my story started, from childhood. I was always like a, chubby kid and got teased for it and all the things. And Basically from the age of 9 until the age of 35, I was always on a diet. I was on a diet, off a diet, but either way, like dieting was my whole world. And I had done every diet in the book, from, of course, calorie counting to Weight Watchers a bajillion times to carbohydrate addicts, South Beach, like all the things. And yet, I was in my mid 30s and I was still struggling with my weight. I was still overweight, and I certainly had periods of weight loss and feeling great, but then it was never sustainable. And so by the time I was 35, I got pregnant with my son. And after he was born, I just decided, forget it. Like, I'm so done with this. I have so many better things to do with my time, like, raise my child, my career, all these things. I didn't have the capacity, especially because like it didn't work. Like I was like, if it hasn't worked at this point, like it's not going to work. And I don't want to spend any more mental energy on this. And at the time I was actually, my background is in education. And when I got pregnant with my son, I was a high school administrator, but I knew I wanted to go back to the classroom once he was born because I did not want to have such a kind of intense job with a new baby. So I returned to the classroom and I was given the opportunity to create any course that I wanted. And so I created a course for girls. So it was only open to students who were female identified. And the course was really around their own empowerment. So we did yoga and meditation, but our curriculum was actually, it was, I designed a curriculum that was really student led around the issues that were impacting girls. Like if you remember high school at all, you remember that like nobody's talking about healthy relationships, or if they are, it's like from this very pedantic, like there's like some super unrelatable adult at the front of the room who's telling you what a healthy relationship is, who completely doesn't have any sense of what your world is like at the age of 15. And, so we designed this course to really help them. I designed the course to help girls navigate their own lives from an empowered place. And part of that was around, obviously, body image and food and health. And on the one hand, I was preaching, like shoving down their throats, body diversity and self-love and all of this stuff. But yet I felt a little bit like an imposter in a way, because I was still struggling with my own relationship with food. And so while I was at that time about 30 pounds overweight, and I didn't really hate my body, I didn't really have a problem with my body. I was like, I'm just a curvy woman and I think curvy women are sexy. So I'm right there with them, like I felt good in my body, but it was my relationship with food that was still really bothersome to me. I would overeat regularly. I would always eat. I didn't feel like there was a point between starving and stuffed. I was always one or the other, and which meant I was always physically uncomfortable, because both of those states of being aren't comfortable. I ate a lot. My husband is 6'7", ex-hockey goalie, and I could eat just as much as him and not be phased. And it just felt like something was off with my relationship with food. And so, but I was done with dieting, and I actually then enrolled in life coach training because I wanted to gather some more tools to help my girls navigate their lives. They would come to me with these like huge issues and problems, and I realized I didn't really have any tools to help them make their own decisions. I just had my opinions. I'd be like, you need to dump him and he's not good for you, but I'm like, that doesn't help them. Like they need the tools themselves. And so I went to life coach training to see if I could gather some of those tools for them. And I did. But along the way in life coach training, I had heard about weight loss coaching. And Dr. Alex, I'm not kidding, that the first thought that I had when I heard about weight loss coaching was, well, that sounds like a scam, because if that worked, I would have done it by now, because I have done everything. Right. And so I literally, this was in 2016 when I went to training, and I did not even consider it until 2018 was when I first accidentally stumbled upon a tool that we use in weight loss coaching. And it's a mindset tool, right? It's not about food. It was actually about your brain and how you think, and how, and kind of regulating your own hormones so that you can really start to tap into your natural hunger and satiety levels. And so this tool was mind blowing to me, because I stumbled upon it and I tried it because it didn't involve dieting at all. And I lost 7 pounds without even trying. And I was like, wait, what just happened? Like, how did I just lose weight without trying? Because I try to lose weight and I can't. So how did that happen? So at that point, I got really curious and I really wanted to learn more. So then just little by little, I started to learn, and then I went through training, and what happened for me, like the reason that this is now my mission, which my mission now is to free up the collective mental real estate that women are currently investing in counting calories and carbs and all of that. And instead, like, let's free it up to focus on what really matters in our lives. I mean, like, I have degrees from Stanford and Berkeley, and I wasn't using them because I was so focused on, my body and my relationship with food. And it's like, this is such a waste of mental real estate. So now that I've had that kind of sense of freedom in my own life, I'm like, I have to just help other women with this, because I believe we can solve the world's problems in a matter of months if we could just free ourselves from the ball and chain of dieting.
I love it. And that's, yeah, totally. My mission is to like help women break free from misinformation and societal pressure and a lack of self-worth, and step into the power that they really are. So
1000%.
Yeah.
Yes, totally.
Well, you brought up so many great things in your story. It's rather recently, I'm going to share this because I haven't talked about it on the show yet, but I have a client that I'm working with, and she got on their call with me and was like, so if I don't do the food stuff, is this detox still going to work? And I was like, okay, hang on. Like, what's going on? What's up? That's essentially what I asked her in my coaching side. I was like, all right, what's up? And she just was really earnest. Obviously we're over Zoom, but she like looked right in the camera and she's like, I've been on a diet since I was 13. And my daughter, and she's in her 50s, she said, my teenage daughter looked at me in the kitchen the other day and said, Mom, this is the first time you haven't been on a diet. And she was just like, I need to heal my relationship with food. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, that's totally, she's not trying to cop out of something. She's recognized what the problem really is and what's plagued her and why all this stuff hasn't worked. And that was part of, your story and what you shared. And so much of it comes down to mindset. And I didn't share with you before we started, but I lost about 30 pounds last year. Having been in a similar place of like, just my weight kept going up. I helped other women lose weight, but I could not figure myself out. And there were some things that came together, but a big part of it was actually the mindset and just believing it was possible, and recognizing I'd had a terrible body image conversation since forever. Like, I thought I'd escaped my dad's comments about how much I should weigh when I was a soccer player with a soccer butt. But apparently I didn't, because even when I was running marathons in a size 0, I still thought I was fat in pictures, right?
Totally.
And so, there's so many places we can go with this, but let's dive into that mindset piece, because I think it's the thing that's missing. Like, there's this whole weight loss industry and culture and diet culture and the like, oh, I'm not eating that, and the restriction and just like all of this negative stuff that has gotten put into our world, and we have to be able to break through that. Anything's going to work. So
absolutely. Well, and I think that so much of the mindset piece is rooted in in the work that it sounds like you do, which is around self-worth, right? Because we have been socialized, from birth, basically, that, as women, we have to be fearful of our hunger, and we can't be trusted with food. And, that you're gonna, if you're not good, right? If you're not, this idea of being good or bad with food, if you're not good, and then if you're not good, then you're going to wear the shame, right? Because it's like, when you carry, quote unquote, extra weight, people can see it. So it's almost like this public shaming of, I'm the biggest one in the room, and so I've clearly failed, and I'm clearly bad. And then that skinny one over there, she's clearly good. And so, I mean, there's so much of it is socialized, and so, I mean, I think that it's multifactorial. There's so many pieces and it's complex, but that point of self-worth, of recognizing that I am worth slowing down for, to make myself the healthy lunch that I really crave today, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to take a ton of time. Like one of the things that I teach my clients is like, this is not about, because I don't want to spend a bunch of time in the kitchen. I don't enjoy cooking, but I do want to eat really well and really healthy. And so it's like recognizing that like eating the crust off of my kids' sandwich, or, you know, grabbing the box of Cheez-Its because I didn't take the time to prepare for something that I'm worthy of. You know, I always think about, like, I used to do this exercise with my clients where I was like, imagine you're Oprah, you know, and like, what do you imagine that Oprah's eating? And yeah, Oprah has a chef. So let's just imagine that you have a chef that's going to create these meals for you. What would you be eating? Because nobody's eating a box of Cheez-Its if they have a personal chef like Oprah, right? And so it's not to say that now you've got to like hold yourself to that standard of always eating in these like really healthy ways, but it's just recognizing that you're worthy of nourishment, and you're worthy of having a healthy relationship with food, and you're worthy of the time that you might invest in yourself in that way. And you mentioned your client with a teenage daughter, and that's one of the main reasons I do this work, is because this is a generational issue that is passed down from mothers to daughters, first and foremost. And yes, the media plays a huge role, but seeing our moms, you know, even just seeing my mom counting points at the table, it's not, she wasn't shoving it down my throat, but it sends us a message that this is what we as women do. We count points. We're careful with food. We should be fearful of food. And then we overgive and overwork and overwhelm ourselves by taking care of children and careers and everything else. So it's like, well, of course that's going to get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many thoughts I just had while you were talking through all that. But the big thing is reframing, like, you know, I think so many of us were addicted to sugar. And so like we put our self-worth in like, oh, I'm going to have that Starbucks, or, you know,
Yes.
up here where I am, we have all these local coffee shops, and it's, you know, I've been in the position when I used to own like a huge chiropractic wellness center and had a bunch of staff. And it was like my treat at the end of a really stressful day was, you know, it was decaf and a dairy sub, like non-dairy milk, but
Yeah.
I'm still going through the coffee hat line, right? And
Yeah.
changing that self-worth to like, no, we are worthy of vegetables and like good,
Yeah.
healthy things that are going to leave us feeling good. And
Yes.
that is such a shift, I think, for so many of us.
Huge shift,
Yeah.
because you just said it, right? Like, I don't think that as women, we are socialized to feel like we are worthy of feeling good, right? Like, no, I just need to worry about if everybody else feels good,
Right.
you know?
We don't matter.
But
Yeah.
no, we are dispensable in that way, right? Just give.
Yeah. And the thing is, and what so many of us don't recognize, I think, because we're just so in that, like, well, I don't matter. It's about everybody else. Everybody else is, we do matter. We matter to them. Like, and they
Totally.
deserve for us to take good care of ourselves so that we can be available to them in a way that when you're running, you know, burning the better candle at both ends, you're just not.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you know, I have a one of the things that I realized in my own life was when because I talk a lot about self-trust and self-betrayal, right? And a lot of times, well, as women in particular, or, you know, or humans who have been socialized as women, we have become quite accustomed to letting ourselves down, right? So we make promises to ourselves, like Monday morning, I'm going to get back on the wagon, you know, and I'm going to eat healthy, and I'm going to stop going through that drive through and stop, you know, I'm going to kick my sugar habit, and all the things that we say, we're going to start exercising, I'm going to start running, I'm going to start training for that marathon, you know. And then Monday rolls around and we don't do it for a bajillion reasons, right? And usually those reasons are somewhere in the like in one of two camps. It's either like, well, I really didn't want to, I really didn't feel like it, or I had other priorities, like, you know, running kids around and my boss and my team or whatever it is. And so what happens is we become like, we completely normalize self-betrayal, meaning not showing up for ourselves when we said we were going to. And, you know, one of the things that I talk a lot about with my clients is like, if we treated our partners like that, or if we treated our friends like that, they would stop hanging out with us. Like, if you let down your best friend, like every time you said you're going to show up for coffee and then you didn't, like, she's not going to show up for you anymore. She's going to be like, I'm going to go find some new friends. But with ourselves, it's just normal. It's like, I told myself I was going to eat that like healthy lunch today, and instead I didn't, and I did this other thing. Oh, well, I'll just start tomorrow. We don't hold ourselves in the same regard that we hold our friends, or that we hold our kids, or that we hold our partners. And I think that what happens then is we become so accustomed to letting ourselves down that we can't trust ourselves. Just like you couldn't trust somebody who constantly lets you down. And so when you set goals for yourself, there's this part of you in the back of your mind that's like, yeah, that's never really going to happen. I'm not ever really going to do it. And it erodes our own relationship with ourselves, right? So we don't show up for ourselves. So we never meet the goal. And therefore we end up having a pretty crappy relationship with ourselves because, we never feel good. We never follow through on ourselves. So one of the things that I do with my clients is we start by just starting to build trust with ourselves. And that is as simple as making a plan for tomorrow, right? And it's like, and I always tell my clients, I'm like, we're not planning to eat healthy. We're not planning to lose weight. We're not planning any of that. We're just going to plan, what am I going to eat tomorrow? What am I going to eat for breakfast? What am I going to eat for lunch? What am I going to eat for dinner? Am I going to have any snacks? And it's not about like being good or bad. It's just, what do I plan to eat? And then I'm going to promise myself that I'm going to eat exactly that. And the purpose of it is to really learn how to start to follow through on yourself. So if you're somebody who is eating 3 scoops of ice cream every night and you tell yourself, I'm going to give up ice cream, I'm going to give it up, but then you keep eating it every night. I always tell them, like, put 3 scoops of ice cream on your plan for tomorrow. Like, we're not here to deny ourselves, put it on there and then eat your 3 scoops and then feel what it feels like to have followed through on what you said you're going to do for yourself. And then from there, we can start to ratchet it down a little bit, right? Like, so maybe we go from 3 scoops of ice cream to 2.5, but the important part is that you're following through. It's not about what you're eating at this point. It's about building that trust with yourself.
I really, really like that. That's really good and profound because ultimately it's about, I was on like a total integrity kick my entire 20s because I went through some personal development training that we talked a lot about integrity. And essentially that's what we're, self-trust and it's keeping your word to yourself.
Yes.
And that's being in
Yes.
integrity with yourself. And when you're out of integrity, like nothing works right. The world is not aligned and you're so spot on that it's with ourselves. And we have that betrayal of ourselves that is just driven by all of these external things, and we have to be willing to slow down long enough to recognize it and then to start healing that relationship with ourselves.
Totally. And I love that you say that because in terms of integrity, whenever I think about women that I am attracted to or admire, they're always women who are in full integrity and who are just so confident and grounded in their own wholeness, right? Like integrity in that sense of the word. And then, and yet as women, we fall prey to this, people pleasing that we're constantly trying to do. You know what I mean? And people pleasing is the opposite of integrity because I'm trying to manipulate. I want you to feel a certain way about me, or I just want you to feel happy. So I'm going to try to do things over here to make you feel that way. But I can't actually make you feel that way. And then I'm out of alignment. I'm out of integrity, right? So it's like when we, eat our mama's apple pie because she made it and you really didn't want it, but you ate it because you wanted her to be happy. It's like that same idea of like losing that sense of self. And then really nobody wins.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. I love that you bring that up. I had a client, it was during the holidays a couple months ago, but she said like her neighbors and, family kept bringing them sweets and stuff and they weren't eating it. She was, she'd been doing really well and was just loving treating her body, but she couldn't say like, turn it away. So it was coming into the house and then she's like, I don't know what to do with this. And then one day her husband answered the door to her aunt or something. And he was just like, oh, thanks so much for thinking of us. We're actually not eating that right now. So if there's someone else you want to give it to, that would be great. And it was like, not a big deal. And she overheard it. And she was just like, I can do that. Like, what? And, and that's, that was just, he was being in integrity with himself, where she was having this like big emotional, and then in her head about we worry about all this stuff that really, it doesn't have to be a big deal. Like, don't make it a big deal.
That's right. That's right. Like, and if somebody's upset that you're not eating what they want you to eat for whatever reason, because they made it, or like, honestly, like that's an issue with them. Like, like that's not your problem. Yeah. Right. Like I can't hinge my happiness on whether or not you, Dr. Alex, eat my, like casserole. Like if I'm hinging my happiness on what you do, then I'm going to be pretty miserable myself. Right. And so that's where I love the concept of just emotional adulthood, where it's like, we all get to take responsibility for our feelings. You know what I mean? And like, you know, I love you, but I just don't prefer to eat that right now. And I'm not gonna, just because I think it's gonna make you happy,
Yeah.
you know?
My
Yeah.
husband is actually one who has we're about 4 years into marriage, but he's in a different world with food from where I am, because I've been on my journey for almost 20 years. And, there's
Yeah.
certain things that I'm like, he's like, why don't you want to have ice cream with me? I'm like, well, because generally I have a sore throat in 3 hours and I'll be really mean to you. So
Yeah.
I know this. So why, do you want me to make that choice? I don't really want
Yes.
to make that choice.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
And
Well, and that, I love that you said, I'm going to be mean to you, because I remember noticing that when I would be out of integrity with food. So when I would eat something that I hadn't planned for, I wasn't following through on myself. Right. And then I,
right.
ate it because I wanted to make other people happy. I found that I would get grumpy with other people. And I realized, I was like, oh, this is really ironic that I ate this thing because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. And now I'm like grumpy mommy, and then I'm like, so really this just I could have, the opposite of what I wanted to have happened, because now everybody's miserable because I'm
Yeah.
grumpy.
Exactly. And and part of it takes slowing down long enough to know these things and to be able to notice that, and just like you said, starting to work on that relationship with not just with food, but with ourselves too.
Yes.
And cluing into what do we really need.
Yes.
It's been interesting. I have like an emotional and energetic part of my assessment that I do with women now. Some of this is from my integrative medicine work I've been doing, but some of the questions I ask are like, do you take care of yourself? And are you in tune with what you really need? And the number of women, and part of that is, who I speak to and who I'm attracting, but the answer is no, like never.
Right.
They're marking it as a 0. And I'm so interested and curious, and this is probably what my dissertation will be about, but and a lot of what you brought up is like, it's societally driven and there's all this stuff, but like, what is that where we decide that we are just not worth it? So I don't know if you have any insight. You've shared quite a bit already, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's how we're socialized. I mean, I really do. And
yeah,
I think probably part of it is, I mean, it's always a bit of nature and nurture, right? I mean, like,
right,
there's this part of it where, I mean, if you think about it, like when we first of all, just when we conceive of a baby, like our body is kind of taken over in a lot of ways, right? Like where it's like, certain things are, priorities have shifted, just physiologically, they have shifted, right? Um, and so on the one hand, we've kind of given ourselves over. And then when you have a baby, like humans are the only, mammals that are born completely dependent on their parent, or dependent on an adult for their survival. And so when you really look at how much we as humans have to give, and the truth is, I mean, if you think about just sustenance from a biological standpoint, had to come from the female body, right? From milk coming from a female's body. And like men were really irrelevant to that point. Like they can't do anything. And so like in this way, like when I think about it, I think that part of that kind of giving ourselves over is kind of biological. There's some points in there that like biologically we do that, but it's not forever is the thing. And we were never designed to do it on our own, right? Like we were, we had communities and aunties and mothers and cousins, and, we had villages to help us. So it's important to recognize that I'm not trying to say that like we're somehow biologically destined to give ourselves over, but I do think that there is some piece of that that's there. But then I also think that coupled with the socialization of women, and then especially, I mean, even just like men going out to work and women staying home and taking care of everybody, and the invisible labor of women and all of it. I mean, it certainly benefits a patriarchal society to continue to socialize women in this way. And it's not just men who are doing it to women. I don't mean to imply that either, but so I think it's complex and there are many factors, but I also think it's something that we can liberate ourselves from. And I think that we've come a long way, and I think we can continue on this path.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a little bit of a side note, but an interesting point you brought up is just the idea around community, because it's something that, especially in the last 2 years, we've lost in a big way.
Yes.
And we stay so busy in all the things that, and I've engaged in communities like at church and whatnot, and kind of had my village, especially I was a single mom for a lot of years and went through a divorce when my kid was pretty little. And I had people in my, like, I'm not
Yes.
near my actual family. They're, I mean, I'm in Alaska, they're in Vermont. So they're like literally on the other side
Yeah.
of the continent. But I was able to create this, people, and we helped each other and supported each other
Yeah.
and did that. But many of us are missing that, and we aren't taking the time to both rest and to create that community
Totally.
of support.
Totally. Yeah. Are you familiar with the work of, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the author's name now, but with the blue zones? The blue zones. Are you
I
familiar?
am. There's a couple different authors out there, but I'm
Yeah.
familiar with them. Yeah.
With the concept. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the one of the things that the Dan, I cannot remember his last name now, but he was the original journalist who started the investigation of like, why do people live longer in these, areas of the
Right.
world? So essentially for your listeners, it's a fascinating concept,
Right.
fascinating studies about just why do people in these certain pockets of the world live the longest, and they are the most vibrant and healthy, right? So it's not like they're 108, but they're like in a hospital bed. They're like gardening and like drinking red wine and enjoying their little lives, right? But the reason I bring that up is because he just came out with a new Blue Zones publication it's a challenge. It's like a 4-week challenge. And I picked it up. And one of the things that he has identified are these like 9 zones that he talks about. That basically what he has come to after decades of studying the Blue Zones is it's not just about what people eat, it is how they live. So it is about, to your point, community. It is about general health and well-being. I mean, there's these 9 kind of factors, right, that people value and prioritize. And the community one was really interesting because when I did the little Blue Zones test, because I thought I would like my results would be like really good because I'm so healthy, I exercise and I eat my vegetables. And like, I thought for sure that I would score high, but I actually scored really low in certain areas like community because we did just move last year. So that's one part of it. But so we moved 8 hours away from home, but also I don't always prioritize community because I'm an introvert and I work from home and you know what I mean? So like I could easily go without seeing people for months, just my little family, but recognizing that there's so much health and wellness around having a community. And I realized when I did the assessment that I was like, I need to work on that. Like, I want to work on that because when you have community, it bolsters your health in so many ways that you just, again, it goes back to feeling good and feeling better, and I deserve that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And just another piece of that, like for women in particular, our stress response and how we de-escalate is we're not fight or flight so much. It's we actually need to tend and befriend. And they've done studies on this that like physiologically we're a little different from men because we don't want to go fight somebody. We need to sit down and talk about it.
Yeah.
Glass of wine. And husbands aren't really good at that.
Right.
Because
Right.
they're like,
right.
oh, I have to fix something. What do I do? And you're like, no,
Right.
just listen to me.
Right.
And as we can start to foster that again, as the world's kind of opening up again, I think it's huge and something all of us need to work on. That, and then rest is the other one that I think a lot of women think they're healthy
100%
aren't. And I'm guilty of this too. It's always my lowest score, that in community.
Yeah. Well, the sleep is, I always say sleep is actually my number 1 priority, in that because I have learned over the years, like, to your point, that it's been a journey. I have learned that without sleep, everything else suffers in some way. So, right, like how I'm showing up suffers, my attentiveness to my clients suffer, my relationship with my family suffers because I'm, grumpy essentially, or just not as present. I'm hungrier, right? So then I may be eating more because I'm looking for energy through food when really what I needed was rest, And so what I have just found, and I do struggle with middle insomnia. So I fall asleep, no problem, but I wake up in the night. But I have actually restructured my day so that I no longer see clients in the mornings, so that if I do have a night that I'm up, I can go back to sleep and, wake up naturally. But really recognizing that it was such a priority for cognitive health, for mental health, for emotional health. I mean, all of it was just really important.
Yeah. And I come across a lot of women, like those listening know I have a nasty head cold right now. And I actually, before we got on, recorded an episode, and just, part of why I got here is we flew to Minnesota my son was visiting his dad there for 3 weeks. And so we did like a turn and burn, which I'm in Alaska, right? So that means our flight was at 2:50 a.m. We don't
Oh
leave
man.
at normal times here because of the time difference. And we flew all
Right.
night and then, ended up going to a concert with him, which was super fun. But I basically had 2 or 3 nights where I really didn't sleep. And it's just a perfect
Yeah.
storm for your immune system not working really great.
Yes,
Like, and now
totally.
I'm, dealing with, I got hit with my period and a cold, like
Oh
in two
man,
days. And
I
I'm like,
know.
oh my gosh.
I know.
Um, and so just
Well, and I,
recognizing and creating, like, you have the ability to create your schedule that works for you. I, have worked on a schedule and not just sleep, but also having time where like you aren't pushing yourself and you curl up with a blanket and a cup of tea, or like,
yes,
do
yes,
those nurturing self-care things that rejuvenate you because you're
yes.
worth it.
Yes, because you're worth it.
Yeah.
Because you're worth it. And then also, there are studies that show that like the more we worry about not sleeping, the worse it can be. Whereas, so to your point, it's like when we do have these circumstances that we're kind of out of our control, or where we're not going to sleep, it's like also recognizing like I'll be okay. Like it's not because like I had just said, it's this huge priority for me, but it also means that it's also not a big deal if I don't get enough sleep for a couple of nights, like I can roll with it. Everything's going to be fine. And so kind of having, I think, even just a healthy relationship with how we think about sleep, a balance there.
And not creating, because when we worry about it, we're creating more stress and we're creating all these,
Yes.
and our body
Yeah.
responds. Like our body will, if you think something that's making you stressed, it will
Yes.
respond by becoming
Yes.
stressed.
Yes.
That's going to ruin that. So
Totally. Isn't that
cool.
fascinating?
Very. So, and just, I have a feeling we could keep going for hours, but in kind of bringing this full circle, where, for those listening that are like, okay, I've tried all the diets and nothing works. And you mentioned something that you did mindset wise that had you lose 7 pounds. So I'm curious, just what's the first step? Like where do women start with healing, where you really need to start, which is here, ladies. It's not about cutting the calories and restriction and how often
No.
you go to the gym or any of that. Like, well, let's push pause like my client
Yeah. Yeah.
did and just let's start to heal our relationship with ourselves and our food. So where do you recommend
Yeah.
that?
So for for me, it was like it's a 4-part process. And the first part is recognizing that. So for me, I only work with women who are overeating, right? So I don't work with women who are, just looking for the right kind of diet. That's not for those are not my clients. My clients are women who have done every diet in the book and they still are struggling with their relationship with food. They're still finding themselves overeating, even if it's healthy stuff, they're overeating it. They don't feel good about it. And so for me, the first step is really for clients to understand, or just for humans to understand that it's not your fault, that the reason that there are actual like chemical reasons why you're overeating. Like there are things that are hormonal reasons. When we eat certain foods, it actually, like the example that I will often use that most people understand quickly is sugar, right? Which you referenced earlier. Like we've all probably had that experience where when you stop eating sugar, all of a sudden you find that you're not really craving it. But if you start eating sugar, like for me, it used to be chocolate covered almonds every day at 2 o'clock because I would kind of get into that slump at work and I'd be tired. And then so I'd start popping chocolate covered almonds. And then the next thing you know, every day at 2 o'clock, you like can't concentrate until you get your chocolate covered almonds because you're having such a strong craving for sugar. So if you don't have the chocolate covered almonds, you find the vending machine kind of thing, because you're like, I'm going to figure this out. So that is an example of how what you eat, it's one example of how what you eat can impact your hunger levels and your craving levels. And that's a hormonal response in your body. It's a chemical response in your body that it's not your fault that your body's having that response. There's good reason for it. And so the first thing is just to understand that it's not your fault and there is actual science behind why you are overeating. And there are answers and solutions, which is way beyond the scope of our talk today. But what I always tell clients to go first is to start with learning how to. I actually teach a tool. You can get it on my website, but the tool is basically how to only eat when you're hungry, and then how to stop eating when you're no longer hungry. And for most women who have dieted, like me, who have dieted for decades, our hunger and satiety meaning our ability to feel satisfied by food, our hunger and satiety levels are totally out of whack. So I never felt really hungry. I mean, I would get starving at some point, but like hunger didn't really happen because I was always eating preventatively, because we're always told as women, make sure you carry a snack in your bag and you don't want to get hungry and then you'll become a ravenous beast who's out of control, like this idea of women, right? And so I never really allowed myself to get hungry because I was kind of constantly eating to prevent hunger. And then if I did accidentally get hungry, it was scary because I was starving, and then I would eat this huge burrito and then I'd be overly full, and right. So it's about recalibrating that hormonal response in your body. So it's learning how to feel your hunger, and then also learning how to answer hunger before it gets to the point where you're feeling like ravenous and like you could, eat a small, I don't know, baby.
Ow.
And then, but then also learning how to feel your satiety levels when it first kicks in, which is something that was totally foreign to me. And learning how to respond and respect that. And so I teach this tool. I teach it actually in under 17 minutes. It's not complicated, but it was the first tool I learned where I was like, okay, let me try this. Because what we're doing is we are awakening that hormonal response in your body that most likely, if you don't currently have, if you don't know when to start or stop eating because your body's giving you the signal, it's because you have it's called metabolic dysfunction. You've dieted so much that our metabolism's all screwed up, right? And so it's a matter of bringing that back into a balanced state. And then from there, then you can start to work on some of the other pieces of, well, okay, when I'm eating these things, I find myself hungrier. And if I stop eating these things, or at least eat them less frequently, I feel better. Again, going back to your point, Dr. Alex, of feeling good. And then, so that would be the second step. And then the third step is really then that's when it gets into emotional eating. Because for me, it was like, okay, now I know when to start eating and when to stop eating. And I know how to kind of change how I'm eating so I don't have such strong hunger and such strong cravings. But none of that helps me when I'm exhausted after a long day and all I want to do is drink a bottle of wine and eat a wheel of cheese with some bread because I'm tired and I deserve it. And that goes back to kind of what you were saying earlier about self-worth, right? And this idea of like, I actually deserve so much more than eating nachos on Friday night to like make up for my crappy week, right? But emotionally, I had gone to food for so long for comfort and for soothing and for fun and for all the reasons. So that's really the mindset part that comes in for my clients, which is, okay, now that I understand the chemistry, the science, and I know when I'm hungry and when I'm not, what do I do when I still want to eat? Because I want to numb out an emotion or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So 3-part. And then the 4th part that I mentioned earlier, because I said 4 steps, that 4th part is really then about once you've really learned how to stop eating for emotional reasons and really kind of gain control over that and feel like I eat and it feels good, like 95% of the time. Once we're there, that's when we really move into elevating self-image, and then that's where we really start to work on identity work and really becoming someone new with food so that it lasts, right? So it's not a diet. This is a total lifestyle shift. So that was a very long answer to your very simple question, which is where do women start? I say start with that tool, which I can give you the link so you can put it in the show notes. But but it's at my website and it's a 17-minute training and it's just that starting point. But it's that same starting point where I started and lost 7 pounds and was mind blown.
Yeah, and it's interesting because and you're talking about becoming someone new, and this is so prevalent in a lot of the work I do now, because it's actually prevalent in quantum physics too, which is the basis of my PhD program. And it's really, we have to step into a new way of being in order to get somewhere. And as long as you stay stuck in your old patterns and your old, way of relating to yourself and to food, you're never going to get to whatever it is that you want to become.
1000% agree with you. Totally.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this has been a lot of fun on many levels. And I will put links to your website into that tool that you mentioned in the show notes. But is there anywhere else that women can go to connect with you if they're like, I want more?
Yeah. So my website is liapinelli.com, LIAPINELLI.com. And I'm on Instagram at Lia Pinelli. I'm also on Facebook, but I'm mostly on Instagram.
I feel like everyone is. I'm the opposite. I'm more on Facebook than Instagram, but I'm trying the new
I
world.
used to be. I just started to make the conversion like this last year, and just it felt right. So
Well, there you go. When it feels right,
yeah,
it feels right. Awesome.
that's
Well, thank
right.
you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me because
Thank you. Thank you for having me despite not feeling well. I really appreciate you rallying for this conversation.
it raises my energy. So it's all
Yay, good.
awesome.